While we're waiting, if you don't mind, by show of hands, who is a first-time entrepreneur here, early stage? One, all right, two. And I guess the rest of you guys are serial or seasoned, so we'll try to direct both camps.
Seems like there's some investors as well.
Investors?
Yeah, I see a lot of investors right
Yeah. Well, those guys should already know we're all family on.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the family office of the panel. I'm sure we're going to have some stragglers coming in, but I just want to kind of start the discussion because it's usually something that we take a full hour, and there seems to be a lot of interest for some reason. Family offices, as you know, have traditionally been perceived as being non-transparent, and I hope that, at least on our part, we'll try to remedy some of that by discussing what we do, what we look for in a deal, how to get noticed, how to get funded, and most importantly, I think some of the common pitfalls one needs to avoid as we move forward. Now we have allocated time at the end of the discussion to take some questions from the audience, but if you have any specific question as we're discussing, please raise your hand, and we'll try to clarify any position at any point that you wish. So, without further ado, I'd like to start the introductions on the panel. We have, well, let's start on my left.
Okay. Steve Kim, I'm the partner responsible for investment strategy and risk management with a multi-generational single-family office out of Philadelphia. We've been investing in life sciences, early stage life science funds since about 2006, and we've invested in quite a few of the more established firms like OrbiMed, Frazier, Versant, but we've also invested quite heavily into first-time funds as well, and we started about 3 years ago a specific program to invest in just early stage venture capital, and one of those sectors is life sciences.
Okay, I'm Ron Palivoda from the Palo Water Group. We're based out of New York City. We basically, just like almost every family office, we have a private equity arm, a real estate arm, and of course a venture arm that focuses on early stage startups. And within that ventures arm, we have a fund called the Health Tech Fund, which, as the name suggests, we invest in health technology, specifically looking for opportunities that are data-infused projects. So things like precision medicine, data, molecular diagnostics, things with respect to what I call the connected patient, remote health monitoring, and wellness applications. So essentially anything at the intersection of health and data analytics, we want to hear about it. And separately, we also have a data lab, which is a team of really experienced AI guys that help us during a vetting process, but also we use them to work with projects within our portfolio as well as projects outside in our portfolio in other family offices, hedge funds, and so forth. So they've developed a suite of AI engines focusing on genomics, focusing on digital bioinformatics, information coming out of wearables, as well as, of course, robotics and logistics and stuff like that. So,
Sure, I'm Jason Rieger, PBM Capital Group Managing Partner. We are a family office started about 8 years ago based on a successful entrepreneur, focused exclusively on direct investment in biotech and healthcare. We've done preclinical to commercial, biologics to devices, and small molecules. Our team is an experienced group of folks from pharma and other backgrounds capable of providing help to the entrepreneurs. So we like to truly partner with entrepreneurs and bring much more than capital. We take anywhere from majority ownership stakes to significant stakes in companies, but become their partner and try and help them in future capital raises, operations, legal, and regulatory support. As examples, I have been the principal correspondent and manager of FDA meetings on behalf of our portfolio companies with the scientists working on developing clinical strategy, regulatory strategy, as well as facilitating operations, manufacturing, etc. So we like to find companies to partner with, entrepreneurs to partner with, and help build successful biotech assets that help patients. And the exits are when it makes sense. So we don't have a dedicated fund. There's a separate group that has managed the private equity, etc. We're focused exclusively, as if we're a VC fund, on the entrepreneur and the asset.
I'm Mike Ryan. I have a family office that really is I guess a first-generation family office in the sense that it's my own earnings from a career in finance, primarily. I'm a partner at Goldman Sachs at the time of the IPO and for about 8 years after. And I managed about $18 billion for Harvard University and their endowment. Of that 18, about 6 was direct investments, and about 12 was allocation to other funds. And so I had a perspective on both of those. I also have made a commercial business, Bullet Point Network, which is our analyst team and our software tools. We built some proprietary software for fundamental analysis that we can talk about separately, probably not in this panel. And we have a team of 12 that we make available to portfolio companies and to other family offices and venture capital investors who need that analytical support and rigor. Very much like other panelists here, what I found is that the successful investments that I've made and the successful investments that I've seen others make almost always come with a high level of engagement with those companies after the investment is made. And so we have built essentially a business to provide that. Our niche, our neck of the woods is strategic analysis, financial analysis, the kind of interactive strategic model that a company and a board needs to chart their own future, and that investors, especially later round investors, quote unquote institutional investors, need to see to understand with credibility what they're investing in and what biz dev partners or strategic commercial partners for joint ventures need to see. And so we basically provide that suite of services to companies and to other venture funds.
My name is Kevin Schimmelfinnig. I'm a first-generation single-family office out of Raleigh, North Carolina. We've been around for almost 20 years. We've probably done over 100 investments in the medical device space, directly and covertly, I guess I would say. We're members of several funds. Our focus is primarily med device and diagnostic. We do jump out of those a little bit. We've recently moved due to family wealth preservation into some real estate and other things of that nature. So now we're about 25% of that's in real estate, alternate energy, and even have an entertainment company. So we are focused in helping the company execute. And I can't agree with my peers and Mike as well as we just said. It's we get involved. So we like to go in when they're either 12 to 6 months away from commercial execution to ensure they have a good plan and executing the plan. And usually we can get them better investment based on the plan being executed. And then we actually 100% own an operation company called Salesforce for Hire that will come in and execute on that model. And then when Salesforce for Hire is done, it gives that to the company, and then we fall back to the passive investor. What's interesting about that is the same problem the early stage companies has, so do the large corporations, because they hire Salesforce for Hire to do the same thing. And that's given us some visibility into bigger companies' portfolios and what they're looking at, which helps us decide what we're going to invest in very early on. We have a team of about 30 down in Raleigh. Our fundamental charter at the moment is looking for, we kind of cycle, so we go where we plant seeds and then harvest. So we harvested a lot last year, so now we'll cycle back to look at earlier stage companies that are getting ready to commercialize in the next, like I said, 12 months or so, and help them get to that point. The other thing we'll do is we'll actually look at pulling out technologies out of corporate America, but I don't think that's for this discussion anymore.
I just want to point out that later this afternoon, you're going to have a workshop dedicated to Salesforce for Hire.
Yeah, Dennis, who runs all this, asked me, he said a lot of the early stage companies don't understand when they go from technology-centric to what I'll call customer-centric. So just some fundamental things like if you have a super duper unique product and how you line that up. So yeah, there's But thank you for mentioning that.
Ron, could I just clarify? Did I understand correctly? Steve invests in funds and everyone else does direct investing and you through your fund do direct investing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We do a little bit of both,
Okay.
depending on the time we need.
Yeah, I primarily invest directly, but I also have some fund investments, including in funds that I'm also engaged with to help them with their diligence and monitoring.
I try to stay away from investing in funds. We're busy enough doing our own thing, so that, we're quite happy with what we're doing. But you never know. There's always a first time.
Ours are pretty heavily relationship-based, so we've known them a long time. We've done deals a while ago, so we don't necessarily jump into something. We do look at participating indirectly when we're going into a technology we're naive to, so we like to partner at that point, and we reciprocate as well. If we're going into a med device deal, and I have some peers in the family offices that are heavy in real estate and want to learn about medical device, it's safer to go in a partner, so to speak.
If I could make one little comment that relates to your question, I think everyone knows this, but just to make it clear to the companies in the room, this is an unusual panel. If you took a panel of all family offices in the world, the vast majority of their capital is invested in funds. Yes. And that's why if you just call them up and say, I've got this great company for you, you're literally talking to someone about something they don't do. And so you need to understand if they do direct investments, then this is a relatively good use of your and their time. If they don't, and I would say it's probably 80+% of the capital in the world in family offices is invested through other managers, not directly. We're an unusual group.
And I would say
And that's entirely just the selection bias on the part of myself and the other resident organisers. We like talking to people who make direct investments in startups, so that's what we have here.
We see a lot of co-investments, so even as a fund investor, probably see 20% of our GPs actually send us co-investment opportunities, so we do see quite a few of those.
Also, the term family office has gotten a little loose. It's very strong in Europe for 100+ years, and here it's become a little trendy. We've been around a long time, and when you talk about a family office, it's another thing people don't understand. You call up, and we're responsible for whatever the family wants.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, we had a child going to college, couldn't find a dorm, so we bought the building. Easier.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we don't do any of that. We're investment focused only in our family office.
That's what I said. That's a true family office, is to move the family's agenda forward.
Yeah.
Will it be investment, philanthropic, all those things, and make their life easier.
So I think that, as you can obviously see, there's no such thing as a family office model. It's all over the board.
And that's the downside of it, I think.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Be warned.
It's
Be
tough
warned.
because
Yeah.
no one looks the same. Really.
So as an entrepreneur, especially a first-time entrepreneur, how the hell am I supposed to know who to approach? How can I target the right family office for myself? What other resources are available out there? Well, obviously we have the internet, right? But also, as Lucy would attest, there's vast database that Resi has with all that wonderful information. So if you're a first-time entrepreneur, or even if you're a serial entrepreneur, I certainly encourage you guys to reach out and see if that database actually has something that has a connection and resonates with what you're trying to do. But once you found a family office that you want to target, okay, how would one approach it? Okay, do you just pick up the phone and call? Well, let me ask anybody on this panel. Okay, what is the best way to approach you guys?
From how we get them mostly is word of mouth. So it's funny, when we come to conferences like this, I'm getting to see the same face over and over. So they're smart enough to keep me informed. Maybe we're not a good fit at that time. And one deal we're very excited about we have here that we saw 2 years ago that we weren't. So that person kept after us. They politely is a key word, continued to inform us along the way. So that was great. Making sure you've got some type of relationship. I'd also look at, if you can, find out companies that have had investors, find out who the investors are, call the company of the CEO that I'm talking about, ask them if they could give you an introduction because you fit the portfolio. You just want a warm lead into them because that will be the most helpful. Most of the stuff we'll deal with will come from what I'll call friends that we know throughout the industry. I mean, we average unsolicited 25 or 30 deals a week. There's no need for deals. Getting your deal to the top of the deck and then staying actively engaged in marketing your business. You just became a salesperson. So that's your job if you're a CEO, is the 100% salesperson. You should keep after it just like you would a customer. And that would be my suggestion. But I try to do that. And the other thing too is, you referenced LinkedIn. have a clue of what the family office might do. But I say that, and I'm going to totally be contradicted by telling you, we've actually pulled back the amount of information we put publicly because it's just much more effective. There's just, again, most family offices don't want to be known. People that run funds want to be known. So it's kind of a different, just understand those two nuances. They're a little bit more covert, at least my experience has been.
Well, I think there's plenty of information out there about us.
Yeah.
But I think it's an opportunity to kind of highlight, I think, a deficiency that many entrepreneurs have, that it's kind of a sore point with me, is that when we meet with an entrepreneur and for some reason it doesn't make sense for us to move forward with the project at that particular time. So we say no. But what is the meaning of no? The meaning of no is maybe not right now, but we might be working on some initiative that you might be a good fit. So I think it's important to follow up and establish a longer-term relationship with whoever you meet on a family office, if you like that person, obviously, and create a longer-term dialogue, because we want to see not just your idea, but also how you execute generally. Because sometimes your idea doesn't work for no fault of your own, but you're executing actually in a well-established way, in a way that we like to see. You're communicating on a timely basis. You're doing the right thing in terms of managing your team. People like you and so forth. So if you approach us later on, because we already have an established relationship with you, it's easier for us to be comfortable in taking a risk on you. So take the opportunity and don't just squander it by not following up, maybe connecting on LinkedIn or do whatever you need to do, because you guys are the new generation, young kids out there, to kind of establish a connection and a relationship. So not only do you can use a warm introduction to get into a family office, but an opportunity like a partnering session in RESI, then over the longer term, establish a relationship that way.
So, I was going to say, there are people I'm meeting at this conference that I met a year or two ago, who, just like was commented down here, and I keep good notes as to the conversations, and if I come back and we have a second meeting and you've made no progress since the first time, and it's just basically a reoriented pitch deck, that tells me a lot. But performance really, really matters, and if you've achieved vast majority of some of the goals you set, maybe even exceeded them, that's the best way to get recognition and acknowledgement. You never know what's going to happen. That was the other thing that's important to recognize about the family offices is that the network they have is pretty large. They're generally connected with other individuals, institutions that have capital or access to expertise. So we're a majority owner in multiple public companies. And those public companies are often looking for either assets, business development opportunities, partnerships. And so the ability to, as you walk in, going in open-minded as to what might come out the other end is not what you're thinking it might be, but it would still be a very good opportunity for both the asset and the entrepreneur, as well as the investor, because they're looking at it from a very different level, from a very global portfolio approach, not just each individual investment alone.
And sometimes, somebody calls me up and say, hey, do you know this team? Because, they're doing X, Y, and Z. You've had an opportunity to meet with them. Do you like them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I say, if I know them, obviously I can give them an accurate response. So in today's age, just send an email updated, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done in a quarter session against our overall plan, you can get me to yes at some point if you're actually executing properly. But don't squander the opportunity, don't squander at all.
I think that one of the things that I think is important, whether you're talking to a fund or a family office, is try to triangulate where they're investing. The stage they're investing, the geography, whether they're targeting therapeutics or devices or diagnostics. Those things are really, really, really important for you to get a handle on, because we're focused on early stage, so we like to see outsized returns. So we're going to be, we're going to look at our funds and look at how they evaluate their science and the addressable market. But that's way different from certain family offices that don't like to go that early. They want to go later, or they want to de-risk, or there's a different stage they want to invest in. So those things are really, really important. But one statistic I think is interesting is that there's $3 to $4 trillion that are parked in family offices that is investable worldwide. So it's a huge dollar amount that's being invested in either direct deals or in funds. So I think, you know, family offices are getting more and more active, investing in venture, and I think there's a big opportunity as entrepreneurs to either work directly with a family office, or even if you're not targeting family offices directly, when you talk to funds, the family offices are typically a decent size of the LP base for those funds, and they will be happy to say, hey, this doesn't look good for us, but we have an LP that is really interested in direct deals and that are really focused on this area, and they'll be happy to do that in most cases.
If I could just add a wrinkle to that. Okay, that part of the responsibility that I have in the family office is to do a strategic assessment of where we need to be 5, 7, 10 years from now. And some of the initiatives that we have publicly disclosed, which you might be targeting, are not the full complement of what I'm looking for. Because I can tell you I got some things cooking in the back room that I'm looking at right now. And before pulling the trigger, I want to make sure that I know a certain set of projects that I should be targeting if I pull the trigger today, tomorrow, whenever. Or I need to understand, maybe I need to reach out and reinforce some of my internal systems, some of my internal people, maybe form a consortium with somebody else. So we got things cooking in the back. That's part of the challenge of a family office, as opposed to, let's say, a VC, where a VC, you have a fund that is going to mature 5, 7 years. A family office, it's ongoing. And I need to make sure that we have something to invest in, 10 years from now. So our focus might shift, probably will shift. And this is an opportunity, like these conferences, it's a great opportunity to kind of stray a little bit away from our quote-unquote traditional types of investments and learn who's doing what with respect to our overall new strategic investments. So now you have an opportunity to meet with a family office. Okay, you walk in, you have a great pitch meeting. What is the decision-making process? So for example, Mike, you're a single family. So are you the decision maker? Are you the decider?
In my case, yes, but I have a team of 12 people that supports me and also supports other family offices in their investment process. And we have a formal vote, actually, on things. You could say it's like a vote in a very poorly run banana republic, because you can throw out the results of the election and just do it. But it doesn't happen that way. If in fact the people that have done a lot of work have strong reservations and are backed up by real unanswered questions, the likelihood of proceeding is zero, is approximately zero. So I would just say one thing to be mindful of is you may meet with people who to you don't appear quote unquote as important, but the reason why someone has chosen to hire them and is paying them is because they value their work and their input. And so I would consider that when you get requests or things, it's important. The other thing I would say, which is not so much about who or how the decision, but we talked earlier about relationships and time, and it's better to meet people over a period of time, and if you don't know someone, it's better to be introduced, because there is no substitute for that sort of level. Assuming that you're doing that as well as you can, the number one thing I would stress is in each of those interactions, which you should anticipate will be more than one, just to start out with it, there's going to be a several interaction process. Make sure you talk as much about what you are going to do as about what you have done. So put forward specific milestones, specific actions, things that you expect to achieve. That can be couched in terms of use of proceeds, an area that I don't think people spend near enough time preparing for. How are you going to use this money as specifically and as credibly as you can tell me in order to achieve these milestones that will be beneficial to my investment and to your company. And then what are the, by the way, the second time we meet or the third time we meet, you're able to update on those things that you have already forecast and talked about. And I think it gives a lot more credibility to what you're saying when you have plans and milestones. The worst kind of investment that anyone can make is a bridge to nowhere. If they put money in and it doesn't get you to the milestones that you need, and now you have the ability is truncated or you're not able to go further, you're in a very bad position as a company, and the third-party investor is in an untenably bad position. And so making sure that you've laid out what you're going to achieve with your capital, with your team, and what milestones I can count on is very, very simply put important.
So it sounds like you're suggesting that sponsorship within an office is important, and therefore, as an entrepreneur, you shouldn't necessarily just target the office as a whole, but an individual in that office who would be who's going to champion your project at meetings and kind of push forward, trying to set up a meeting. Am I reading this correctly?
That is one part of it, yeah.
At our, there's several of us that receive deals all the time, depending on who you get and their selection bias or interest bias or background bias, you may or may not make it through that first filter. If there's a deal that the investing partner feels passionate about, they will champion, and I think a champion, whether it's at a family office, investment group, partnership, CMO, CRO, pharma company, if there isn't a champion on the other side advocating for you, deal's not going to happen. It's just impossible. There's too much noise and too much other things going on. People are too busy. In our group, when we have interesting deals, someone will bring it up with weekly meetings. If we've seen something interesting, we'll bring it up. If it makes sense, we'll put a CDA in place, look at a data room, and have a conversation. And as those things progress, we've closed deals in 30 days. We've had deals that take a year to get done because the company is disorganized or they have taken investments and there's no paperwork to support the ownership structure of the company. So at some point, with any investor, but I think underestimating the sophistication of a family office is one of the mistakes I've seen very often. Family offices are not rich, dumb people. They're actually mostly intelligent people and have hired intelligent people to help manage their resources who have fiduciary responsibility to the family. So I think you have to think of that, they take that job very, very seriously and are looking for the long-term outcome for the family, both reputation-wise, because the family will recommend to other families or other friends of theirs, hey, I'm doing this deal, do you want to co-invest as well? And people take their reputation and their credibility very seriously, and so they want to advocate for things they believe in. And when they do, you get that support, and that's a lot of wind at the back of the company to help get things done.
Stephen, you have gatekeepers at your?
We don't. We have an investment committee, so, and it's by unanimous vote. We typically try not to be the Banana Republic, but, we usually know pretty early before the IC actually votes whether a particular investment is going to be okay or not. But it's a unanimous vote. We also have an operations team that actually does diligence on top of our investment teams. Which they take a look at financial statements and the service providers and et cetera, that a particular fund uses as well. So they have a veto vote when we come into the IC as well.
Now, we look at projects more favorably if they add value to our existing portfolio, as opposed to just another standalone project out there. Mm-hmm. Is that a consideration? Your existing, does that?
It doesn't, and I think what's interesting is we've made this comment over and over again. All the family offices look very, very different, and that's an advantage and a disadvantage. We tend to be very diversified in our investment mandate, so we invest across all the asset classes. So we have specific teams that focus on a specific asset class, but we invest across all of them, and we also invest globally as well. So we get to see
a lot of funds, we also get to see all the investments that our funds are making. So we kind of get an idea of kind of the landscape and the macro environment and what's happening. We've typically been very, very pre-seed, seed, and early A focused, specifically in therapeutics because of the outsized return potential. But lately, we've been looking at bioscience generally speaking, and we've been starting to target synthetic biology and biomanufacturing as well. So one of the points there was that you're going to shift around a little bit in kind of what we're looking at. But we do see a lot of capital and a lot of innovation and opportunities just across the whole bioscience ecosystem.
Now, Kevin, what is your decision-making process?
So I guess I'd say I'm smart enough to know I'm dumb. And the reality is we have some really smart people in our office. I refer to them as quant. We go through a process and no longer can any one individual do it. Now, I do have veto rights, so I do have the privilege of saying no if we don't like a deal. Usually that comes back because we know some type of, I'll call, market activity that justifies, we know that's not going to happen. Like we had one particular deal we liked. The logic was we're investing because we knew the acquirer, well, we found out the acquirer was going to jettison that business unit, so there was no reason to get involved. But internally we have a team that will look at every deal. We try to stay in the stuff we know. We try not to get too diverse. Stepping into real estate is kind of a little bit of a feel for us, but in the medical device and diagnostic space, we know the buyer, we know the seller, we know the company and what they're doing, and does it fit their model. Making sure it aligns with how it fits in their system. Just like knowing if a company has to sell to a big company for more than $75 million, usually a medical device company, that's going to get pushed to a board level decision. If you're willing to sell for just under that threshold, it may not go to the board and get checked pretty quickly. So just getting, understanding who the buyers are. So we have all this information that we have from candidly doing a lot of things wrong over 18 years, almost 20 years, and a lot of deals that went well and didn't go well, and we aggregate that information. The greatest challenge we have as a family office is we're not a fund. We have capital available. So I will tell you our decision decision criteria sometimes will be looser than the rigid when we're moving things, because we're recycling capital. We don't, money's always at work, and it's kind of like an evergreen fund, but yet the reality is there's times where we have surplus cash, we had a liquidity event, and there's reasons to deploy capital. We'll look at deals that might have got the B+ grade versus an A grade and come back on those. Especially if we have an entrepreneur that's come back and looked at it. So those could bubble back through the system. But for the most part, we have a pretty good team that will shut it down. And we actually have, someone who looks at it from analytical, we have hardcore accounting people. They're like, we're never going to make money. I mean, according to them, we'd never invest in anything. So it's good to have them calibrations.
Well, I won't ask you what you did wrong, because we'll do it offline.
Yeah, not enough time in the day.
Yeah, like they say, you only learn by your mistakes. Lord help us, we didn't all make mistakes. But I'd like to open up the discussion to audience members. If you have any questions, we have about 15 minutes. Lucy has commanded. And any questions?
So it's an individual for each family office. Do you have a typical range of investment and management style? How much you like to get involved?
In terms of dollars?
Yeah.
Our check sizes vary a lot. It goes from 500K to 10 million. Our sweet spot is probably 2 to 5. And we typically don't get involved with our funds at all.
I don't take that into consideration at the initial meetings at all. I'm about looking at the project, looking at the team. Can they execute? I've never had an opportunity to not be able to fully fund a project. It's just an issue of does it make sense for us from a resource availability, because it's not just about the capital, it's also about the capital and whatever team members on our side we can provide to assist the project. So money is not an issue, but the team and the project, how it fits into our existing portfolio, those are the key issues.
I think for us, the amount of capital is dependent on what the need of the company is, both what the entrepreneur is looking for today, but also if we can avoid a B and a C round, do it all as the A round today, We've had entrepreneurs that wanted to raise $2 million at a $10 million valuation, and we'll say, we'll give you $10 million at a $2 million valuation, and let's run the company, and 2 years later, it's worth $200 million. And entrepreneurs happy, we're happy, and we've taken capital raising out of the equation. So I think going into it, it's more of what is the asset, what is the trajectory, and what capital and resources can we fuel it with to get to failure points or success points faster. The key is to answer the question, not keep the company in business, prolonging with more questions to ask to get to more uncertainty. It's ask the right questions, ask the hard questions, and ask the questions that will convince other parties expert in the space, pharma companies who might be the acquirer, what they need to see in order to be interested, and then we'll drive the decisions to make that the case. But we don't go into any investment where we couldn't fund it to commercialization. This way we have no risk to other people not being there to provide capital and the investment, then you're squeezed. And we like to avoid being in that position. So we fund the operation and we're there to partner with the company. We'll get good economic terms for sure, because we certainly want a return. But we're interested in how do you drive the asset forward, and the conversations usually start with, what can we do if you had unlimited money? And that's a different way to think about being an entrepreneur, because it's not often the case, but it gets you to think about how you could do things, and that's the way we like to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, we spend a lot of time, maybe after the question of the team or the CEO or the person, and the question of the TAM or the market, I think probably we spend the third most amount of time on capital, and how much are they going to need to get to different milestones, and do they have a realistic chance of having that? I think you generally want to start at the end, which is at the end of the story, is it worth the effort? Is the opportunity big enough and lucrative enough to support it? And then you want to come back and just literally step from point A to point B and see what are you going to do with resources, including money, but also people and other resources, to achieve milestones that will leave you in a better position there. Those discussions, while obvious, have usually many dimensions to them. There's usually a few paths. There's a few scenarios that a company can go on. And so we like to consider several of those paths and understand which one the company is on. But ultimately, if you have the right team, market, and product, you will be able to raise the money, but you have to make sure that you execute very credibly to those milestones.
Yeah. Again, ditto across the board. I just had a couple of thoughts around the fact that it's a team sport, so when we jump into deals, we like to grab other people to go with us, depending on what we're doing. I will tell you, the more money in, the more anal we'll get involved. No offense, but if I put a lot of money into your company, I'm going to want to know what you're doing every minute of the day. And make sure you're on a plan and stay to the plan, and we update the plan, we talk about the plan, and we keep after that. So if you look for someone to write you a check and send them an email once a quarter, or even worse, once a year after we've called you twice, we're probably not a good fit in that sense. So we don't want to be intrusive in the sense of we expect you to run the company, but on the same token, sometimes we'll put guidelines in. Certain economic things are happening. So like we have one CEO who was not always the best fiduciary steward when it came to picking airline tickets. So he was flying, so we told him, don't buy an airline ticket without calling us. So he didn't last long, but the fact is we never want to be in that situation. That makes sense.
And generally speaking, if you're doing good work, there's always an opportunity to raise more money, as long as you continue, executing.
If there's a question.
Everything so far has been about milestones and when things go right. I'm not asking for anyone to say when you made an assessment error, but when something happened where the founding team you realized was no longer the right team to move forward with, how did you handle that, and how did those discussions work out? Product's great, market's still great, but the guy or gal who's the founder, you realize you need to make a change. How'd that work out?
I'm happy to jump on that. Unfortunately, I've done it too many times. I always jokingly say we've never done a bad deal, we've done bad due diligence. But I'll tell you, if you get in the deal and people start getting fantasies of what the company's going to sell for, then you start having a trajectory to change it, and the CEO becomes disruptive or uncoachable. you've got to quarantine them, and what you're doing to do that is you're going to work through the board and slowly move them up to a position of power and voting. You want to take good care of them. These are great people. I mean, the fact is, we'd have nothing to invest in if someone didn't invent something, so I respect that. I'm not smart enough to invent anything, so I need things to invest in. But on the same token, you get to a certain point, you outgrow it, and I'm very fortunate to work for a great company a long time ago called Steris Corporation. And I watched the company grow, just in the number one fastest growing medical device company in Wall Street, grew like crazy. And there's a point where that guy who did all that was not the right guy for the next level. It was a pencil pushing accountant who he hated. And he came in and took over. And then after that hit a certain level, time for him to go. So it evolves. And I think there's a good discussion with an entrepreneur up front to say, look let me sober you up. You're going to go about 4 to 6 years, give or take. You're probably going to end up with a semi-divorce. You're not going to walk away with a ton of money. You're going to get maybe $4 to $6 to $10 million. So think hard about this before you go. And by the way, you're not going to sleep. You're going to run around the clock. And I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to be a CEO of a company, which, by the way, is I think the average lifespan is like 22 months. And also, if you are a salesperson, your job is go out and sell stuff. And one of the greatest challenges you have with CEOs is when they get caught up in the minutia and don't let the people run the company. And you'll ask them, well, were you out doing something to grow the value of the company? Are you out communicating to your investor core and getting ready for the next round? Or, no, we got plenty of money. Bull. You're always looking for money as a CEO. That's your job. And so some of those realities come in where you have a very technical person, where they're in the room and they're academically off the charts, and they've got to be the smartest person in the room. That's a problem. You got to kind of work them out and say, okay, it's time for us to bring in someone to do that role, and you need to step aside. And always I like keeping the founder title with them. I think that's critical for them. Because again, they wouldn't have done it. But it's happened to us on a couple occasions. But it is something as we go in. Is that person coachable and reasonable? The difference between someone getting funded quickly and over an extensive period of time was the answer to the question, are you coachable? Because if you're a pain in the neck and every time we go to talk with someone, it's a fist fight, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. We have a situation where I had to remind someone that getting funded is not the end of the race, it's just the beginning of the race, okay? And you can't just, you need to work to the next funding round. And especially when you're a first-time entrepreneur, you just don't quite get that. Especially out in the other coast, you see people buying Ferraris and stuff, and you need to gently remind them that that's not going to happen.
I mean, one obvious point that I'll just make is governance is a big deal. And if you don't have control over governance, I mean, you don't have actual board control, or majority ownership control, you really are going to be reliant on the receptivity of the CEO and the ability to connect the other board members around whatever the vision is. And so there's two models. If you have governance control and if you don't. And if you don't, you have a different path. And it really is a major thing. And be aware that the investors are very sophisticated actually about this. The CEO and the founder usually is a little bit myopic in a sense, and that person needs to be myopic actually. If they don't have that sort of blinders on mentality and that sort of uber confidence, then there's a very good chance it's not going to work. But there's a difference between that and being completely unreceptive to the input and expertise that a board or a management team can bring. And that actually doesn't just go up to the board, who technically hires and fires a CEO. It actually goes laterally and down to the key people around the CEO, the key lieutenants and senior leaders of the company. If that's not happening, that's usually a real problem. And to be honest with you, just one little tip, I watch very carefully when I meet with companies how that CEO is dealing with their team. If they don't appear to have a good team, and if they don't appear to have any absorption of knowledge or benefit from that team, that's a real concern, usually. Because there's very few things you can do literally on your own in this world.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. We're kind of lucky in the sense that since we're so early and the funds that we invest in are so early, they're pre-seed, seed, typically pre-seed or seed. There usually isn't a big team around. There's a lot of reliance on the founder and the science as it relates to our life science investments. So we don't typically run into that. But, it is an issue as you get later and later. And that's actually, those are usually the handoff mechanisms when our seed funds or pre-seed funds are handing off to A or B or later stage funds. They understand that they're going to have to deal with those kinds of issues when they come up.
It's a very rare CEO who can go from seed stage to late stage operation commercial. It's not the normal same person who enjoys both parts and has the skills to do both parts. And I think everyone who's an entrepreneur needs to recognize and be open-minded to where the blind spots are. And when people try and explain it to you, understand where your core competences are and recognize who you have to bring in to help. And the CEO title is fine. To be fair, founder with 25% equity or CEO title with 2% equity. Anyone can decide. So I think it's all about what it is you want to do, where is your passion, and recognizing that investors have seen lots of examples of CEOs where things are successful, where they're not, and work with them to maximize success for all the parties and the asset. And that's where it's win-win. If people get hung up on title, and being authority, you soon realize that nobody really has the power unless you're a majority shareholder of the company. That's the person who has the power. Everyone else is sort of working in that environment.
There's a question back there.
Yeah, I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who used to do healthcare consulting way back before this industry became so sophisticated and there were 5 million new startups. I'm wondering, how many entrepreneurs that you see are really, you're operating at one level of business sophistication and they're at a technological level of sophistication. How much do you expect for them, and how much gap bridging are you willing to do from your side, or are there consultants they should be hiring to help them better communicate and pitch to you guys in the first place? How would you like to see that change if it needs changing, or are people pretty sophisticated with the business plans these days?
Well, that is actually the primary reason why Bullet Point Network exists. My sort of commercial company is they don't have that sophistication, and I would argue they shouldn't. Actually, their priority 1 should be the product and the science. Their priority 2 should be the sales and the commercialization, and well down on that list should be the financial sophistication to deal with partners and investors. And I think even if they were like Olympic quality athlete good at it, they're only doing it one time for that one company. And so having somebody or a team that helps them do it, I think is important. So that's my answer to it. It's rare, I guess, certain individuals may have all the skills. They're the sort of new Leonardo da Vinci of our day, and they can do science, and they can do commercialization, and they can do finance, and they can do management. I haven't met them yet. I'm looking for that person, but it's better, I think, to bring in someone that can do that. When you get to be a bigger company, you might have that in-house, but for the most part, forget about seed and Series A. You can be, public, going public next year, or Series D round, and you probably still don't have that kind of in-house capability. That's usually when they get it in-house, is about that.
I actually meant on the commercialization side, not so much the finance side.
Same. On the commercialization side, I would say somewhat the same thing, and that's kind of your neck of the woods. But that's usually one step earlier than the one I just mentioned, but it's usually not at the formation stage. Because just put bluntly, they can't afford it. There's not enough budget to bring in the talent. And so whoever they bring in to do that is essentially available for a low price. And maybe they're lucky and they're very good, but they don't have the budget to bring in the talent usually until they get funded.
The addressable market, though, is really important. Understanding what that is at the very beginning. So for us, it's science and addressable market. Those two have to fit.
Yeah, I would just add that one of the things to think about is, like, when you think about companies, think about all the things they outsource and things they do, and there's certain competencies you should have ownership of, and there's others you should rent. Like having in-house counsel, I don't think is a good idea, but having a really good lawyer, it is. Right? So you I've looked through all the skill sets, and I think that's your point, going through it. And then as they evolve, you'll move in sophistication and knowing you're evolving down the path. Like the lawyer who did your initial paperwork might not be the lawyer who helps you do an IPO, right? So think about it that way. So as you evolve, I think it's real important as you go through the process.
I'm told that we're out of time.
Looks like it.
Thank you very much to all the panel.